This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. It's Lonnie Reed. I'm calling our board meeting of June 25th, 2021 to order at 9:04 a.m. Welcome, welcome. I think as everybody realizes, this is really the annual meeting where we focus on our budget, on our targets, and our investments for the next fiscal year. And we've had some of these issues vetted by two of our key subcommittees already, and a lot of issues resolved going forward. So it's really good to present all of this to the full board. I think the first item of business is our consent agenda, and the minutes from our last meeting, the April 23rd, 2021 meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, John Harity.
Do you hear a second?
Second, Tom Flynn.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Opposed? Questions? Abstentions? Okay, it passes. And also on the consent agenda, we have I think we're really talking about, some of the things that we're doing going forward that are revisiting, reallocating, reconstructing certain of our agreements. And so, Brian, do you take that?
So
who's gonna, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So this is, we engage in a number of federal grants through the Clean Energy States Alliance, which the Connecticut Green Bank is a part of. We were a joint applicant with IPC into a Department of Energy program focused on low to moderate income financing programs. It's a 3-year program. Year one really focused in on Connecticut. Actually, let me take a note. I'll forward you all a number of things that have come from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and that work. Really good analyses of our LMI financing program, specifically Solar for All. Now, as the project moves into year 2 and year 3, the work is going to shift to our partner, Inclusive Prosperity Capital. So this really is ensuring that our PSA with them for the CISA DOE grant, we're able to channel our funding to IPC. So just directing it for year 2 and 3. So there's resolution 2 there.
Yes, I'm just wondering if anybody has any comments or questions on this. Okay, do I hear a motion to approve resolution 2?
So moved, John Harity.
Do I hear a second?
Second, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? Or any abstentions? Okay, sounds like it passes. Moving on to our, I'm wondering, did I ask for public comments?
No, but
No.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think, do we have any public comments? All right, hearing none. Moving on to our next item.
All right, and we can do next slide. This is Brian Farnan. I'm happy to tag team this with Matt Masunis. I'll handle the first item in the last bullet. So the big news is the environmental infrastructure expansion of the Green Bank that passed with bipartisan support. We are really, really excited about this. I believe we've done over the last 10 years proven out this Green Bank model, and you see states and counties and even countries and now bringing that to life in their own jurisdictions. But this is really going to allow us to expand beyond just clean energy We're going to allow it to be able to do improvements related to water, waste, recycling, climate adaptation and resiliency, agriculture, land, parks and rec, environmental markets like carbon offset. So this really expands our mission. We're really excited about it. This in many ways is kind of going to be Green Bank 2.0. It also creates an environmental infrastructure fund within the Green Bank. We have the ability to increase our bond terms from 20 years to 25 for clean energy projects, and even up to 50 years for environmental infrastructure. There's an expansion of our SCARF, which is the Special Capital Reserve Fund, which gives us the added protection of the state's backing in some of our bondings. Adds OPM to our board of directors, and we're really excited about this. This really is going to be, I think, over the next year, a major focus of ours, and a lot of people are involved in this. Obviously, the vision of our president, the Governor's Council on Climate Change, many individuals have kind of helped get us here. So we're really excited about that. With that, do you want Matt to explain the next two bullets?
I do.
All right, perfect.
Good morning to the board then. So the second bullet, Senate Bill 356, which is now Public Act 21-48. This began as an advocacy-driven idea to have Department of Housing fund an affordable multifamily energy efficiency retrofit program using building permit surcharges. But it's since ascended into the priority list, I feel, as this became a clear use of potential federal funds. So it now shall be deep, establishing such a grant program for energy efficiency on affordable multifamily. And the Green Bank might have a consultative role in here. Also, the tariff compensation that is due for rollout in 2022, that is available to residential property hosts of distributed energy resources, that shall now be open to 5+ family or unit multifamily buildings, not just 2 to 4 family. So that's potentially impactful for that space generally. The third bullet, energy storage. This is now Public Act 21-53, legitimizing a process already underway at PURA through DACA 17-12-03, RE03, establishing longer-term storage deployment targets. Near-term 300 megawatts of capacity by 2025, and intermediate term, I believe that's 650 by 2028, and then by 2030, 1,000 megawatts. And also allowing for PURA to establish programs, as they were underway, for customer and distribution side systems, in other words, behind the meter, in front of the meter, and also authorizes new deep solicitation for larger scale storage units or facilities. Back to you, Brian.
Sure, and this last item is property tax exemption for renewable energy. This really came out of litigation that the Green Bank was involved in, and many of the third-party residential solar providers were involved. What happened was we had approximately 20 towns that started to no longer allow the property tax exemption for third-party owned systems. This is obviously the minority view by a small handful of towns. And this legislation proactively clarifies that, yes, this exemption applies to both third-party owned systems as well as systems that are owned outright. This will also likely help us close out the litigation, because we're kind of closing kind of the potential world for the amount of money that's potentially at stake. And I am happy to report that even before this exemption clarification occurred, we really are down to kind of our last handful of towns. I think we're down to like 5 towns that we have not been able to settle out this litigation. And this legislation passed with overwhelmingly support, with the backing of CCM, which is really important to us. You know, obviously, anytime a quasi-public involved in litigation with towns, it's an awkward place to be. So the fact that we were able to close out the vast majority of these cases, only have basically 2 attorneys that are holdouts with their 2 towns left, and the fact that CCM backed this legislation, I think sends a powerful message that we were in the right place here. Could we move to the next slide?
Great.
Next slide. Perfect. And these are just a couple more items that we wanted to talk about. Matt, if you would like to give a quick rundown on those. And the only one I don't see here too is obviously the Tesla bill did not pass. This was the whole ability to buy EVs, online. And this is just a classic example that the dealerships have more political pull in Hartford than I would say, the renewable kind of legislative efforts. But with that little sidebar, why don't I pass over to you, Matt, to give a quick rundown of some of these items.
Thanks, Brian. And I'll emphasize quick because I know we have a busy agenda today. There could be multiple such slides here with legislation on the edges of Green Bank's operations. The first one here, Just Transition and Community Development, that was Senate Bill 999, now Public Acts 21-43, really aiming at the 2+ and 5+ megawatt capacity grid scale facilities and the establishment of community benefits and workforce provisions, prevailing wage and such when it comes to those. Bringing together the prerogative of deploying more renewable energy faster and cheaper with the need for communities to realize those benefits. Adds 2 seats to the Energy Conservation Management Board. That's SB 856. One for low-income residential and one for the municipal perspective. There are new fuel cell procurements that are now authorized. Utilities shall issue those solicitations, and PURA may approve them. Up to 30 megawatts with preferences for landfill and brownfield siting. New electric supplier restrictions. Any existing variable rates that are in effect shall be voided and no new ones shall be created. And other items having to do with electric suppliers through that. Anaerobic digesters eases permitting on farm-based units and also increases, or rather strengthens, provisions for separation of organics, including the food waste producers and the threshold by which they must export to approximate facility. And the one item on here that, if anything, you read about elsewhere would have been the bottle bill, strengthening those sorts of provisions for collection so as to reduce what's ending up in the landfill, whether it's increasing from 5 to 10 cents. The surcharge on those, or establishing a custodianship program for NIPS and such. So I'll wrap it there, but if you have any questions for us, for me and Brian, feel free. Thanks.
And I would just add that this was a very successful legislative session. We were really pleased. The expansion of our scope was huge. What you see happening with energy storage is kind of the next big thing, kind of in the renewable space, was very important for us. So we were really excited that with the outcomes from this session. So with that, I'll take any questions, or we could move on, whatever you guys like.
So this is Lonnie. I just want to say congratulations, because that the solar property tax issue, when I was chair to energy, kept coming back year after year, and it kept going to public, to the the other committee that deals with municipalities. So there were all kinds of legislation coming in to try to grab a hold of that money, and I think it's great you got CCM on board. I'm just wondering, is cost on board too?
They did not make public statements, but they did not do anything against it, so they did not have any issue with it. This really was just kind of this was almost like you had 1 or 2 rogue assessors who talked to other assessors and like, hey, I think we've got this loophole here and some ambiguity here. And but I think it's more the tax assessors looked at this property tax issue. They kind of backed out and thought that the intent of the legislation was clear, the language was potentially, even if unclear, was clear enough. So it's really sad, because you really have Rocky Hill and Cromwell, for example. You've got situations where I feel like the lawyers are probably charging more in fees than the towns could even potentially recoup. So hopefully they'll come to their senses, and we could settle in a way that they can walk away, and we can potentially move on.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do because there were a lot of municipalities that were trying to get their hands on that money over the years, and I think so much of the work that the Green Bank has been doing with municipalities in the sustainability arena has created new relationships and a better understanding of what it is, we bring. So congratulations.
Thanks, Lonnie.
Any other questions or comments?
Both CCM and COST were collaborators on the environmental infrastructure policy, and they're very active on that.
Great.
So
Very good.
Lonnie, this is Brian. Just a couple of reinforcing points on this slide because they're relevant to us looking ahead with our comprehensive plan going forward. So on environmental infrastructure, I just want to say that, our mission is to confront climate change. We have had clean energy as a part of our definition for quite some time. So the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions through the deployment of clean energy is very obvious. When it comes to environmental infrastructure, there's a component of it that deals with adaptation and resiliency, making ourselves more resilient to the impacts of climate, being able to bounce back after a climate-related event. So I think we'll be grounded in that first, because there are a number of other things like agriculture, parks and recreation, other things that are on there that might not be directly, confronting climate. Secondly, on that is it's my expectation that I'll come back to the board next month in July with an overview of what a process might look like to develop a comprehensive plan. By statute, we have to have a comprehensive plan for environmental infrastructure, just like we have for clean energy. So what I'd like to do is just try to put my thoughts out there in terms of what a process might look like and get I'll work with the staff and the team to develop that and then present it to the board next month for feedback, and then we'll execute on it. On the energy efficiency retrofit grant program for affordable housing, this was a huge win for renewable energy on affordable housing because as the market transitions from net metering to a tariff, multifamily was being treated as a commercial and industrial facility, which meant that it was going to fall underneath a cap of 50 megawatts a year, and it was going to have to compete against other projects based on price and renewable energy credit value, an all-in value. As we have all learned from the ZREC program, it's very difficult to do any sort of projects on a multifamily affordable. We were advocating in a docket for carve-outs, bid preferences, adders, but then discovered along the way with DEEP that if we simply enabled multifamily to be treated as a residential customer in the tariff, then they would be treated like what we've been able to work on the Resi tariff, where there's no cap. The tariff rate is set, based on a reasonable rate of return, and all the key bells and whistles are really in the residential customer segment. So by this law passing, effectively, we are improving the opportunity for affordable multifamily to participate in behind the meter, which will be important for our solar PPA. And then later on, you'll see our refocusing of inclusive prosperity capital from efficiency and health and safety to solar and battery storage, where we've got a better grip on the market. And I'll ask Mackie in a second to talk about the tenant benefit that's going to come to those low-income families. But on energy storage, to Matt's point, yes, we're in a PURA docket. It's our expectation that the Green Bank's going to be co-administering the battery storage program. And as we transition to the end of the RCIP, our 350 megawatts, we're now looking ahead at developing 1,000 megawatt battery storage industry. So it's good. It's kind of refocusing and rebuilding a new segment of the market. But Mackie, anything on the affordable housing and how we ensure that the tenants get benefit?
Yeah. So in addition to qualifying these properties for the residential tariff rate, I think just as importantly, it also allowed for the aggregation of all the individual tenant meters. So it's creating what is essentially on-site community solar. And we don't know what it'll look like yet, but there's going to be a process at PURA to figure out how the benefits of the solar system flow to each of the individual tenants. It won't be like a traditional solar system where, you know, it's actually connected behind their meter and, you know, they're benefiting from the electricity and net metering. It'll most likely be something like virtual net metering or a separate check that arrives or something. We have to figure that out with Pura and make sure that it's done in a way that actually doesn't reduce utility subsidies that might be coming from the state or the federal government. You know, we don't want to reduce their electric bill with the solar subsidy and then just take it out of their other pocket by reducing the subsidy they were getting for their utilities. So we'll work that with Pura, but again, combining the residential rate with this on-site aggregation really opens up a market that we couldn't touch before.
Hey, it's Tom. I've got a question just overall, if I might. A lot of the discussion we've had in the last couple of minutes, and by the way, great update on the legislative action and all that. It spurred something in me, or a question. When is the last time we kind of went and presented to the various towns as to what the mission and the opportunities are for the Green Bank to work with the various municipalities directly, and what benefit we can give the towns as well as their citizens?
Cool. Great question, Tom. Mackie, I'll defer to you because you and Emily are kind of on the ground there with towns.
Yeah.
Yep. The primary program that the Green Bank offers that municipalities can take advantage of is our solar PPA. We've got the only other financing product really that towns use for energy is this SBEA that the utilities offer. We provide the capital for that, but the utilities are really the program delivery organization for that. So on the PPA side, over the last 2 years through our solar map program, we've been doing extensive outreach to a large number of the towns. We want to be careful with that program because the solar development, it's essentially almost a solar development program, which is a service that certainly is offered on the private side. So we're trying to target towns that really need our help, that for whatever reason, lack of resources, just getting bombarded too much, or whatever the reason be, that haven't been able to move forward on their own. So, we're trying to balance that. Hey, we want to go out and tell every town about how great this program is and how we can help them with, we don't want to crowd out the
Right.
private developers.
So Mackie, thank you for the color. I guess I was thinking more broadly, right? As opposed to pitching specific programs, and maybe I didn't frame it the right way. What I was actually talking about was kind of the elevator pitch to the town leadership as to all the things that the Green Bank offers that can be of benefit. Because one of my other hats is I'm a selectman for the town of Fairfield, which is a very strong, as Brian Farner will tell you, and Brian Garcia, who used to be a resident, has a very strong sustainability task force and is very green oriented. But sometimes when I raise the Green Bank and, gee, are we looking to do anything with the Green Bank, or have we contacted the Green Bank, there's not a clear understanding, at least from their perspective, and I'm speaking broadly, about what types of things the Green Bank can get involved in. And I think we might be missing an opportunity there for yet another outlet. Presentations to boards of selectmen and town councils that maybe get some press. Some of the things you were talking about, the 5 towns that aren't, really partnering with us now. The other thing that's really top of mind in this is the fact that with the government sending all this money, regardless of what you think about it, for COVID relief, all these towns are now looking for projects that will help them moving forward. And I'm wondering if there's not an opportunity there to talk more about green energy and investment in green energy and initiatives for the towns.
Tom, this is Brian Garcia. Great comment. Yes, we will do more in this space. Specifically, next month we're going to bring back Sustainable Connecticut. Sustainable Connecticut, there are 121 of 169 towns that are registered in Sustainable CT. I'm co-chair of the board, but through that channel, we could do a better job of doing some outreach and doing exactly what you're saying. We've been very targeted, but yes, I hear you. And we'll take that up.
Okay. And guys, I'm not trying to add to your workload. It gets frustrating to me sometimes when I bring it up and people are like, well, what does the Green Bank do? How does it work? And, I'm conversant enough to help, but I'm certainly not you guys, right? Who can do a much better job explaining all the different things that you do than I can.
Great suggestion, Tom. Don't feel you're adding to the workload. That's absolutely perfect what we should be doing. So thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank
And
you.
maybe it's thinking about some, convener of something like COST or CCM where, I don't know, annual meetings or conferences or something where we could, get in front of everyone, maybe sponsor or something.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, something like that, as well as kind of a leave behind that this is, the elevator pitch on paper. This is all the things that the Green Bank can provide, all the different programs. This is what we've been able to, accomplish. Just, a 2-page, if you will, marketing about how we help the towns and how we help the citizens. And also very clearly, the municipalities are always looking for ways to save money. And if we go to them and say, if you make your town hall, if you make this school, if you invest in green energy here, not only are you helping the environment and climate change and all the benefits that we say why we should do it, you're actually saving us money, right? On our annual budget. That could really help.
Cool.
Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Lonnie, it's Adrienne. Can you hear me?
I can. Hey, Adrienne.
Hi, how you guys doing? Just to follow up on Tom's comments and Brian's comments, I think this is where the board can be helpful. We're spread out across the state, and so we have connections in our own communities and in those that are neighbors. So when you come into the Bridgeport area, for instance, I know a lot of the people on Stratford, Trumbull, and Fairfield and Westport sustainability committees, and so I would be happy to back up and also do some follow-up with those committees in terms of any kind of presentation you want to make. So I think we can be helpful even if we don't know as much as you do, obviously, about all the programs.
That, and this is Lonnie again, Adrienne, that's really good input. And the reality is, there's an incredible wealth of knowledge within the Green Bank, but to really know your community and what they need and what their issues are, and just thinking the other day of having some discussion in your community with concerns about where fuel cells are going to go, that's really important information because that helps the Green Bank, put together some presentations that address issues that are really being talked about in those communities. So that's very good. That was excellent input. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So I believe, let's see, we're moving on to item 5, which is committee recommendations and updates. And I think tuition reimbursement, Eric is going to speak about that.
Certainly. So what we're bringing today is a recommendation from both the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee and the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee to adjust and amend our educational assistance policy, or our tuition reimbursement policy, which we're renaming educational assistance. We have an existing policy that reimburses employees up to $10,000 per year to pursue either a college education or graduate programs or some sort of advanced learning. We're proposing to expand this program to take advantage of a CARES Act provision that allows employers to pay a portion of an employee's student debt without tax implications for either the green bank or for the employee. The inclusion in the CARES Act was advocated by the Society for Human Resource Management, which is basically the industry organization for best practices in human resources. This expanded program would be great for employees and the green bank. It'll allow employees to retire debt, and it allows the green bank to provide compensation and ideally retain these employees at a lower cost than it would be through traditional salary increases to provide the same level of compensation. This use of federal policy makes the green bank compensation dollars go further. And through this all, we hopefully will increase employee retention and attract employees that we wouldn't otherwise attract. Any questions before we move to a resolution on this? All right.
Anyone there? Hopefully we didn't lose them. Uh-oh.
Hi, it's Lonnie. Do I hear a motion to, so are there any more questions or comments about the tuition reimbursement?
I just had a quick question. Aren't we a quasi-state agency? Like how does this benefit us?
Brenda, for me, you're sounding a little muffled. Can everybody hear her clearly?
No.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
In the chat. It's actually, if you can hear me okay, can you hear me okay?
That's good. The closer you get to your mic, the better I think we are.
Okay. So I was just a little confused around the tax implications. Aren't we a quasi nonprofit or state agency?
That we are. This the tax implications I'm referring to are payroll and FICA taxes, as well as the employee's income tax. So our tax implications would be we wouldn't be paying FICA on it, and the employee wouldn't be paying income tax on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 3?
This is Brenda. I make a motion.
Any second?
This is Steve Meyer. I second.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Who was that? Did you get that?
I think there'll be one abstention, Lonnie,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay, and abstentions? Okay.
Julia, yeah, I think there would be an abstention there from Julia on behalf of
Mike,
Mike.
please. Okay, I get that. All right. So moving on. The Budget and Operations Committee. Targets, budget, and investments.
So after three meetings of the BO&C committee, we're bringing to you an endorsed, unofficially recommended set of targets and budget. So I'll walk through the targets and then I'll give a summary of the changes in budget year on year. So this year, last year you saw we presented ranges for everything. We're back to our normal MO as we're coming out of COVID, going back to more fixed targets. For the incentive programs, we're proposing 1,633 projects for $36 million and 9.8 megawatts of capacity installed. This, you'll see, is lower than we typically have done in the past. That has to do with primarily one driver, which is the sunsetting of the RCIP program. We're expecting to hit that capacity in the next month or so for the statutorily driven capacity, as well as that of the extension authorized by the board. So rather than do several thousand projects that we previously have done, we expect to deliver only 471 as this market is now maturing. We are including in these targets battery storage, as we have an expectation that that Pura will rule on a battery storage incentive program, and that would launch starting June 1st. I'm sorry, not June 1st, January 1st. In these budgets, we have built-in contingencies around battery storage, but as the program is thus undefined by Pura, we would be coming back to the board with a revised budget around battery storage, should that be ruled upon. Smart-E and Posigen round out the incentive programs. You'll see that Posigen is a lower number of systems installed, and that is because it is that Solar for All initiative is tied to the RCIP. We don't expect the work on low-income solar and the progress we've made on low-income solar to end there, as there are riders in the new tariff that target this segment in the state.
This is Brian. Let me add some more to Eric's comments there. So yes, the RCIP is transitioning. In the past, we've typically had anywhere between 50 to 60 megawatts of capacity. So quite a dramatic change there as we get closer to hitting our 350 megawatt target. There was no extension in the legislative session. The tariff will begin January 1st of 2022. And as noted, the battery storage program there, we anticipate any day now Pura to come out with a draft decision on the role of the Green Bank in co-administering a battery storage program, both for residential as well as non-residential, commercial and industrial behind the meter systems. So we anticipate that, and to Eric's point, we'll come back to the board following that Pura ruling with a proposed revision to the budget, given the details of that ruling. But that's to say that as the market transitions to a tariff, we're still keeping our eye on ensuring that the new tariff works for low to moderate income families. We advocated quite extensively in the docket to ensure adders for low income. So BANU, anything less than 60% AMI would receive a 2.5 cent for 20-year period, a low income adder. There's also a distressed communities adder. So if you're not low income but live in a DECD determined distressed community, you'll get 1.25 cents per kilowatt hour for 20-year adder. So we advocated for that in the process. We also advocated for something called direct payment, which effectively means that a solar PV system put on a home, for every kilowatt hour that system produces, those tariff rates can be directed to a third party, like the Green Bank, in whole or in part. Why that is important, Bert did an excellent job advocating in the process, is because that completely or near completely takes out the need to underwrite against the credit quality of the homeowner. So it's going to reduce risk for low to moderate income families, because it's now based specifically on the production of the technology to the kilowatt hour. So we fully expect that as the tariff gets rolled out, we're going to be an active financier of projects in that tariff, specifically in the low to moderate income market segment, to ensure that the progress we've made continues specifically in that segment.
Hey, Brian,
Thanks, Eric.
Can I just jump in for a second and say that's remarkable work, and it's the kind of quiet behind the scenes work we don't see on the board, but those efforts that you just described will inure to the benefit of our LMI mission, quietly, automatically, and future generations of board members will thank you for not having to bridge the gap that would have opened in that community if it weren't for those efforts. So I know it's something you're just telling us about, but it's a huge, huge accomplishment. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. It's, there's policy that happens in Hartford, and then there's policy interpretation that happens in New Britain. And our team was very active in the New Britain process, really advocating for low to moderate income families. We also ensured that the Home Energy Solutions program that's provided through the utilities is still a requirement in the tariff. So we took a number of different priorities, we made them our focus, and we justified them with data and strong arguments, and PURA supported a number of them. And PURA, in fact, stood up on climate change and is allowing for additional tariff beyond the load of the home currently to support beneficial electrification. So if you think about homes that want to install heat pumps or electric vehicles that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, PURA is going to allow systems there as well. So yeah, it's Brian and the team, Matt, on all gears, we got all our team members in the right places at the right times to advocate to help the market. Okay, next slide.
So moving on to the financing programs, we intend to deliver 902 projects for $61.9 million and 19.1 megawatts of capacity installed. This will be primarily driven by our CPACE program, our PPA, and our continued support of the SBEA program, which is being expanded to include the BEA program, or Business Energy Advantage. So just a larger customer size is my understanding. Also included in here, you'll see our little bit of a pivot that Brian spoke about before in terms of how we're addressing the multifamily market. We intend to address the needs there through our PPA offering, and you'll see the decreased targets in multifamily reflect that pivot. Ideally next year you'll see increased numbers in here, but that will represent PPAs being delivered specifically through a multifamily channel of that product. You see transportation in here. We don't count any specific projects, but we do have our carbon offset program up and running. We have aggregated a significant number of chargers through the program that Matt has been spearheading, and we expect to deliver 16,500 tons of emissions reductions through these carbon offsets and through these chargers. And then we have no number in strategic investments, but don't worry, Bert has several things running up his sleeve that we have to bring back to the board as and when they come to fruition.
Great. And just to add there, for example, as PURA rolls out its decision on battery storage, where the Green Bank is playing a role administering an incentive program, we might also develop a financing program for residential and/or non-residential customers as well. So the strategic investment pool of resources really leaves things open for Bert and the creativity of his team and the markets for us to be able to respond to the market needs. On the PPA side, as Eric noted, we're excited by that policy that makes affordable multifamily a residential customer. We fully expect to be able to use the Green Bank Solar PPA for affordable multifamily properties now. If we can get in there and reduce energy burden, specifically by lowering energy costs, if we can get in there and bring battery storage to those facilities and make them more resilient to the impacts of climate, then we are improving the lives of those property owners. We expect that some of those economic savings will be able to be used to invest in efficiency and health and safety. But really our bread and butter, the solar PPA, we want to get that in using the new policies that just passed in the legislative session.
So with that, let's move to the budget, and we can walk through the differences year on year and what we're proposing to do here. So revenues, you'll see an increase of approximately $3 million. This is being driven primarily by earned revenue and an increase in Regi receipts. So overall, we have an increase in REC sales and interest income. So we have more RECs from our portfolio. We're monetizing those. In terms of interest income, we've invested more money, and that's generating more interest income. These offset the built-in or the ideally built-in decrease in utility customer receipts. The more energy efficiency that's deployed, the more you would expect those funds to decrease. In terms of operating expenses, we have a year-on-year increase of 3.1 million. The primary driver in this is meter replacement, which we've spoken about before, for about $2 million. And we need to spend that money to basically ensure our income across the board from our RECs. Specifically in here, we have an increase in personnel-related OpEx of about $1 million. 235,000 of that's from merit from this past year, 81,000 for positions added in FY21, and 158,000 is for open and new positions, of which $125,000 is contingent upon various things being passed, including the battery storage and the environmental infrastructure, which I guess is no longer contingent. In the incentive programs, non-personnel related OpEx, that's, as I mentioned, driven by meter replacement. It includes the battery storage budget, but will change based on the Pura order. So as I mentioned, you'll be hearing more from us on that budget, the sequel, if you will. In terms of financing programs, non-personnel related OpEx is driven by various things, including a website rebuild that we need to do, contractor engagement, which is really to grow our pipeline. We think that putting more structure around how we go out to contractors and bolstering our relationships with them will lead to a larger pipeline. We're growing the Solar MAP, the Marketplace Assistance Program that we have in place to work with municipalities in the state, and the outreach to support that, as well as a couple other outreach efforts that we're trying. In terms of grants and incentives, we have a year-on-year increase of 31,000. That's primarily due to new systems coming on board from the RSIP, but those are offset by a bunch of systems that are starting to drop off as their PBIs have finished paying out. Non-operating expenses are a decrease year-on-year of 1.6 million. That's due to lower interest expense and provision for loan losses. And we are not using ERA funds in this budget as we did this previous year for interest rate buy downs for Smarty. So with that, why don't we move to the next slide, and then we'll take questions on everything. So with this, present our intended investments for the year. You can see these directly support the targets that we previously mentioned and are focused around those. We have a small budget for multifamily. This is basically to get a couple of projects that we've been working on over the threshold, just deliver those line loans. So we expect there to be draws on our existing line facility with C4C as that money gets lent out. CPACE, we're expecting to do 5 million as we grow our own portfolio. The PPAs for the state and munis for the next two items on here for about $11.3 million combined. And then other PPA items on here are about 5.25 actually. And then SPA, we intend to continue purchasing the loans for our existing agreement and facility with Amalgamated and Eversource for 1.4 million, almost 1.5. And then finally, we have another item on here for to continue to support multifamily items. And then in terms of project finance, we have 3.2 million for a Groton fuel, continued work on the Groton fuel cell, and then 5 million in terms of other unspecified opportunities that go back to Bert's toolbox that I was working on, that I mentioned previously. So, basically, what this says is we're using the money that we get through utility customer receipts, the Clean Energy Fund and RGGI proceeds, along with other cash that we have on hand to invest $31.8 million. That'll deliver $13 million worth of interest over the life of these loans. They will have a weighted average return of 5.1% over the next 9 years. That's exceeding our targets that we've set of 4% on average over a 10-year term. So this, in other words, that's a long way of saying we're taking what we're getting in terms of non-earned revenues, public revenues, and we're investing that, and we're beating our target to continue our pathway towards sustainability for the organization.
Great. Yeah, and we're going to jump into that in the next segment, which is, we've had stress in the past. It's cyclical in terms of those public revenues of the Clean Energy Fund and RGGI being directed to the general fund. So to the extent we are investing those resources in interest-producing assets through our loans, that interest income, as Eric noted earlier, becomes a greater part of our revenue sources that covers our operations. And we're going to go through some of those sustainability ratios in a second. But as long as we continue this discipline of finance, we will break even and make ourselves more resilient to the impacts that, again, are cyclical with regards to sweeps.
So Brian, it's Tom. Would it be appropriate to ask a couple questions now or to wait a little bit further in this budget presentation?
Now's great, Tom.
That would be great.
Great. Quick question for you. The revenue, what's the percent growth in revenue year over year?
On a percentage basis. It's about if my math is right, about a 6%.
Yes, your math is right.
What's the growth in operating expense, the percentage growth?
It is about a 12%, if that's.
Yeah, see the optics on this piece of it, right? If I just look at it in that way, doesn't look good to me, right? Particularly given, Brian, your comments about, how it was for lack of a better word, rated a few years ago. You had to go through the changes that you needed to do, right, a few years ago, or a year or so ago, and then COVID. To see revenue growing at half the rate of operating expenses on a percentage basis, and to see revenue not growing as much as your operating expenses on a whole dollar basis, even when you're in growth mode and you're reinvesting and expanding the mission, to me, that optic really doesn't work. I can understand being at a break even, right? But any worse than a break even on those two metrics compared to each other, just I think is concerning in my perspective. I would much rather us say the goal here is to break even because we're investing in expanding programs and we're investing in some of our things to the future, as opposed to see us even losing a couple $100,000 or $110,000, whatever this is. I just that optic in approving a budget like that just concerns me a bit. That'd be my top line comment from the headlines that you just gave me.
Yeah, I suspect the numbers we used was we consolidated the whole organization. So we did financing programs and incentive programs. So the $2 million of meter replacements is, if you take that out of that total OPEX increase because it's required and it's going to be paid back over time, cost recovered, that brings those ratios back into check.
Well, and that's very fair. And I would wonder, and I'm not an expert on this. I don't know what the proper accounting for that is. It seems like if I, from just an accountant's perspective, just listening to what you just said, you basically made an argument that there's a matching issue between the expense and the revenue on that. And I'm not an expert in this. You're going to rely on Bert or somebody else. But the optics of that, again, I go back to, and I'll be quiet.
Yeah, and I would add, I think you raise a good point, Tom. And I think that's part of the complexity that we have here in what's shown on the slide here about the value of the interest income streams over time. We all know that in the financial services business, once you book these transactions, you do all that origination costs, you can basically, I mean, I don't want to give anybody ideas, you could let all the people go and those assets are still going to yield their revenue stream, right? So the investment is being made to bring those investments on in satisfaction or in realization of the goals of the state. So there's it's almost part, because of where we are in the life cycle of this organization and how we have brought people on, moved people off, IPC, everything else. It is complex. I agree with you. The story does not maybe present as well as it could. It's not an easy budget to present.
No, it's exactly right. And it's not, the presentation, and this isn't a criticism of the presenter in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
You kind of led with your chin, right? We did, right? You got socked in the mouth here because you said, hey, our revenue's going up 6%, our expenses going up 12%. And, I would say you either have a presentation problem or we have a financial problem, right? But I think
it's more, and I think it's because the annuity stream that this organization is generating for the state and building basically a clean energy endowment for the state is money well invested right now.
Yeah. So my question is the accounting right, and is this the way that other financial services entities would account for this, by taking all the expense of the replacement up front and the revenue over a period of time? Or do we have accounting options here? And secondly, do we have an option on your financial statements as to, should this be counted as an operating cost, or should this be counted as classified as some other cost? If in fact, I buy your scenario of that, it's not, we're not out of kilter here on expenses.
Yeah, I think it's something that Jane can and Sergio can definitely take up with the accountants in walking through, in particular on the metering side. The problem we have though, Tom, is that we don't have a operational relationship that is long term with the customers, like the third. We do for the and now that you're forcing us on the fly to tease this out, we do have in part a relationship through the Solar Release 2 transactions, and perhaps what we can do is put a portion of it that is really Solar Release 2 related in the Solar Release 2 vehicle, in which case we can recognize that over time. Bonus points for Tom Flynn.
Right.
But for where we don't have that third party that relationship, like a Sunrun or a Tesla, et cetera, would have, I think we're going to be hard pressed to create that relationship, but we'll try.
Yeah, I think you need to go back to your auditors. I don't like the optics of the organization approving a budget that says that your operating costs are growing at double on a percentage basis. Yeah.
This is Jane. Can I weigh in on this?
Sure.
Government accounting is different than regular financial accounting. For instance, when we issue our bonds, when we issued our Shrek ABS bonds, we had to take all of those bond issuance costs right through as expense down to the bottom line in that year. And it's the same thing with these. Government it recognizes things more on a cash basis than actually letting you do a lot of the matching that they let you do in the regular FASBs. So
that's what
for these,
that's what I would have thought. Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Does that get disclosed in the footnotes and kind of carried out and a matching? I mean, we don't need to go through that here in the book, you know. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do have our note 1 where we talk about revenue recognition, but anybody who reads a government entity financial statement will know that it is different, fundamentally different from what you would see in a regular public organization.
I might disagree with that comment that anybody would know. I think you'd have a lot of people that probably, you know what I mean?
People who are looking at our consolidated financial report would know that that's a presentation from a government entity. But if we're doing separate standalone audits that are not within that format, we do run through all of our revenue recognition and our expense recognition in the footnote 1 for the summary of our accounting policies.
Okay.
So we'll try to beef that up this year. How's that?
Yep.
So this is Lonnie. So where are we? So, I mean, do we approve this next resolution with the proviso that the optics are reworked and presented in a way that, I mean, how's everybody feel about that?
Lonnie, this is John Harity. I think, you know, we have to look at it, revenues versus expenses, but we're not you know, we're not a profit-making company. We're a government entity. Most you know, most government department budgets would show just expenses and not much by way of revenue. So we're you know, I think that we're working in a direction to even out those numbers, but it takes some time, and we're performing services for the public. So I don't think that I understand what, but I don't think the
You're breaking
optics
up
are as
for
bad
me.
You're breaking up, John.
as he perceives them to be. Excuse me?
You're breaking up. We missed a couple of golden nuggets.
I was just saying that that I don't think the optics are as bad as, I don't see them as bad as Tom sees them, given the fact that we're a public entity and that most public entities don't have you know, they're all expenses, like Public Works is just all expenses. So in that context, I would hope that people would be pleased with the fact that there are revenues coming in and that we continue to work on that. So that's just my take on it.
Tom, coming back to you. I mean, how do you feel about approving this resolution?
Yeah, I respectfully kind of disagree. We market ourselves as a bank. We say we're a financial institution. We went through the conversations of a couple of years ago. We want to show to the legislature and to the government as a whole that we're holding ourselves to a higher standard and that we actually have a return. And I just think anybody looking and saying that your operating expenses on a percentage basis increase more, double than your revenue, I think that just causes, regardless of whether you're a governmental entity or whatever, that just causes questions or concerns. So I would say if you could carve it out of operating expenses and offset it to explain it, I think that's a preferable way to go for anybody reading the financial statements. Because
Yeah,
I
think
just
that's a good suggestion as far as presentation. Yeah, maybe we should do that before we lock this up.
Yeah, I like that.
This is Eric.
Is that even possible, Jane?
There's no other category to put it. It is an operating expense. It is a one-time unusual operating expense. And along with that and the contingent salaries, which are also unusual. If we pull those out, our expenses are flat year over year.
And so the metering and
the point is maybe, we separate out those unusual expenses with a highlight, and I think Tom's point is then well demonstrated that we're being good stewards. For other operating expenses pretty flat, and but for these special circumstances, we've done well.
It's
So
a
on
more
the-
compelling story to tell. Yeah.
That sounds good to
So
me.
could we approve the budget and come back with the presentation next month? This would be a line item showing the meter replacements on the OpEx. What budgets can't show is the fact on the revenue side that we're going to realize over the next 15 years, over $100 million of revenue that we can't say because the sun hasn't shined. So I would almost say that there should be another footnote in there that says the revenue side can't even be shown because of accounting standards. So if we can, because this is a budget, we're starting in our next month, our budget year. If we can get this approved this way and just come back and show it, we'll show it in a schedule. Just for presentation purposes, then we can post that as part of our comp plan, which I'll be coming back to the board with next month with modifications to. We can show that now.
Brian, this is Eric. Are there timing issues in terms of, getting this passed today with some kind of proviso versus bringing it back, clean next time? Are we facing some timing issues on that?
Yeah, the budget starts July 1st, so getting it approved now, great. What we would be doing next time is it's no modification, it's just a presentation to it.
Okay.
It's not like we're modifying
Okay.
anything, we're just showing it.
Well, I think,
Lonnie,
oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say that, the budget would remain the same, regardless of how we present it. And we really need to move the budget if we can. So I'd urge strongly in favor of passing the resolution, and then, depending on you all to, repackage it as per this discussion. But I think, the other part of it is we always need to remain really transparent, and so that's the most important thing I feel in terms of the numbers. And but if there's some other way of saying it, that's fine. But I think we really need to move the budget now if we can.
I agree. This is Lonnie again. I agree with that. And I also think that the Green Bank team has a really good track record of responding to this kind of input and working it through and interacting and working it through and then coming back with something that is really reflective of the input. So I would move that we somebody motion to approve resolution number 4, and the proviso is that they will come back with some reworked language and presentation optics. Do I hear a motion?
John Harity.
Thanks, John. Is there a second?
Second, this is Brenda.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. All in favor?
Just is there opportunity for comment on the motion?
Oh, yes, of course. Go ahead. Eric.
Yep, sorry. Sorry. So although I wanted to do it before you did the motion, so I apologize. But again, I think, others are closer to this than me, but obviously over the last few years, not just the Green Bank, but the quasis in general have been under a great deal of scrutiny. And I continue to try and remind us that, the full-throated, enthusiastic support for our mission and our operations is not universal. So we have to be sensitive to that. If, for example, somebody mentioned the legislature, but also the media, you get media scrutiny about this budget, and they might pull up the statistic that Tom did earlier. And so it's important that it's presented, in my view, presented in a way that's very sensitive to that, government or non-government. When you've got double the expenses of the income, you have to be aware of that. So I'm fine with supporting passing this budget today with that proviso, and I agree that Green Bank has demonstrated its ability to respond very adroitly to these kind of comments, and I'm sure they will again. I just don't want us to. I just wanted to add my voice to those that would reflect that this is not an inconsequential matter.
Thanks, Eric. Much
Very well said.
appreciated. So we have a motion and a second for resolution 4. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Steve Meyer opposed.
Steve Meyer's opposed. Any abstentions, Julia?
Yes, abstention.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Let's see, item 6. Oh, investment updates. Oh, here we go again. Investment updates and recommendations.
Actually, we're on the sustainability plan update, and we're going to hit a little bit on this too, this revenue versus operating expenses a little bit.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do was to, we have new members to the board and old members to the board. So we wanted to kind of walk through where we were prior to the sweeps, a really important point in the history of the Green Bank in October of 2017, how we responded to those sweeps, how we're doing today towards the sustainability objectives that we set in December of that year. So literally in June of 2017, Connecticut was recognized with, the Academy Awards of Government for the Connecticut Green Bank, and what we've done to catalyze the creation of other green banks across the country. So it was the highest moment probably in the history of the organization, and then the lowest moment hit, several months later when the budget swept more than 50% of the resources of the Green Bank. So in October of that year, the Connecticut General Assembly adopted a budget that effectively pulled $16.3 million each year for the next 2 fiscal years, $14 million from the Clean Energy Fund, which, as you see in our revenues budget, is $25 million, so it's greater than 50%, and then $2.3 million from our RGGI proceeds, and I think this year we had $6 million. So a pretty significant redirection of those public revenues, more than 50%. Which caused us to, literally for the next month and a half to 2 months to come up with a plan. For those board members who are around in the day, you might recall there were certain board members who said we should declare bankruptcy, and other board members who said, "Are you crazy?" And so it was really a stressful period of time, and we had to put forward a plan for how we were going to address those. What we effectively did was we put 3 things into motion. One was we looked at our incentive programs. We administer the RSIP. That program's coming to an end today. But back then, it was eating our cash. It was literally by losing more than 50% of our public revenues. If we were to continue with the RSIP, it would have eaten us alive if we hadn't figured out a way of front loading or borrowing against the expectation of future cash flow. Well, I'll talk about how we monetize that through a funding warehouse with our local banks, and then how we ultimately issued bonds against it. But those were things that we had to put in place at the time. We didn't have any idea how we were going. I mean, we had a general sense how we were going to do it, but we didn't know how it was going to happen. The second thing was our financing programs was, we knew we had to reduce operating expenses. We took an immediate scalpel to the organization. We made 28% operating expense cuts. We severed 5 staff members. We cut our non-personnel related OpEx. We eventually transitioned 8 staff members to a nonprofit but we knew we had to reduce our operating expenses. We knew that we had to manage our non-operating expenses, specifically our loan losses. So Bert and the team are always diligent to ensure that we are, knock on wood, keeping our defaults and repayment risk low, while at the same time utilizing the public revenues that we receive, investing those in interest earning assets. We had set a target of a 5% return over a 10-year term on a cash flow basis in terms of interest income, ultimately looking at a break even of 4 to 7 years. And the reason we did a sensitivity was because, for those of you who are around, Commissioner Smith didn't believe that the sweeps were going to stop. She felt that they were going to continue given the long-term structural issues with the budget. So she felt that greater than 50% was going to continue. Other board members were like, nope, the policy is going to go back to what it was. The sweeps will stop. And so that's the 4 years to 7 years. So the more public revenues we have, the more interest earning assets we could produce. And we are looking more towards like the 4 years than the 7 years because there haven't been any sweeps. Governor Lamont came in and was adamant against sweeping any of these funds. And the budget's been balanced. There's been bipartisan support there, and the state's doing a great job managing on the Treasury side. I'll get into some specifics. And then the third leg was the nonprofit organization. You know, we were going to lose a large part of what we had done, which was to subsidize interest rates in the vulnerable community space. We felt we needed to maintain that mission by separating out staff and moving them to a nonprofit while continuing to raise capital for that segment. You might remember we had Bank of America willing to give us a $10 million loan at 1% interest over a 10-year period, who after the sweep said, goodbye, Connecticut, we're out. So we needed to figure out other mechanisms to stabilize our access to private capital. So let me jump into some of these just to give a little bit more specifics here. So on the incentive program side, you know, you're looking at here 300 megawatts of projects to the 350 megawatt target goal that we talked about earlier on the RCIP. You know, this is about 37,000 projects. Those projects generate renewable energy credits over a 15-year period. We set the price. The utilities have to buy those renewable energy credits from us. All of this stuff at the time of the sweeps, you know, was unrealized. Like we hadn't put all these pieces in place to manage our cash. So we had said, to the extent we can demonstrate that this revenue realization is real, then we can go to our local banks, Liberty and Webster, and open a line of credit that would allow us access to $16 million of cash that would effectively help us pay the state what they had swept from us while managing our cash flow to continue the program. Now, we eventually figured out how to securitize the expected revenues from those systems through first an asset-backed security for tranche 1 and tranche 2, and then a municipal bond for tranche 3 and tranche 4, our Green Liberty bond. But that took time, and those were, you know, cash management strategies that we had to put in place. But you can see, Tom, kind of down below, you know, we have $170 million of expected revenue at the P90 level. That's to say that these systems are going to produce kilowatt hours over a 15-year period based on independent assessment. At that price is going to produce that revenue. We received bonds against that at a much lower level. You can see the incentives that we have to pay out of that of 91 million. So, you know, run the difference there. That's about $80 million of difference. That $80 million should cover our financing expense on our bonding and our operating expenses. And I think in the memo, I included the OPEX as a footnote that we've spent to date, which was like, I want to say 28 million. So we have for the next 15 years, while we continue to pay out the bondholder revenues, we have coverage for our operating expenses based on the anticipated revenues coming in. So like this was a lot of effort. We designed this in December. We hadn't envisioned that we would come to this point and all these pieces would fit the way they have, but we were able to manage our cash while at the same time ensure government didn't stop a program or a market from operating. That's the last thing we wanted to do, was to be another government approach, stopping a program, inhibiting a market. Then on the financing program side, our goal there was to reduce operating expenses while increasing earned revenue. These are just a few ratios that we use for our financing programs. Our personnel-related OpEx, you can see, came down, but is stabilized, at $5.5 million to $6 million right there. Total operating expenses, including non-personnel related operating expenses, personnel, we're at about $10, $11 million there, trying to stabilize that. And then on the total expense, that's where other things are included, like our loan losses, our provision for loan losses, which is an unrealized expense, because, knock on wood, because we're managing those. Tom, the issue on pension and OPEB that you raised, we're going to come back to that. I think in the fall, we're going to have the comptroller come to the board and explain what that is. It's a constant thing that we have to include in our financial statements. That's a big liability, but we want them to be clear and come and present what in fact it represents, because we don't believe we have to pay it. So we're gonna bring them back in the fall. And then on the earned revenue side, again,
and on that, Brian, the thing that jumps out there is the inconsistencies year over year.
Yeah,
and
look at, I mean, it goes up and down, it goes up and down. Yeah, well, anything, Jane, you'd say on this year?
This year, actually, the early estimates are that it's going to be large again this year. And it's really just due to the actual evaluations that are done, and the—
You're really breaking up, I'm sorry.
Are these mics working?
Sure.
Yeah.
Jane, start again, because we kept losing key moments in your sentencing.
Early indications are that the allocation is going to be a little bit on the higher side of what we have seen over the past couple of years, and that it's based solely on the valuations that the actuaries do for both the pension and the OPEB's post-employment benefits, and the allocations that they do to those for the entities like ourselves, who do have to do standalone financial statements, where the discretely presented component units of the state of Connecticut's results.
Yes.
So depending.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that, to the extent that they are changing allocations, it is really just what they're trying to do to get us what they believe is our share of the liabilities on our balance sheet. However, when the payments go out, they are going out from the actual state of Connecticut plans, and they're not anything that we are actually funding. We are just funding what the controller's office wants us to be doing every year as part of the load that we put in our salaries, benefits, and then we, of course, do the payroll taxes as well. So that's our only cash out.
Yeah, just a thought for you there. I don't know if they give you two numbers, one pension, one OPEB, but I might divide them out. It sounds like that. I'd love to better understand their allocation methodology to you guys, to us, because the stock market did really well this year. So it'd be interesting to see, the return on investment should be pretty good, I would hope. What could drag you down is whatever your medical claims are. So it'd be interesting to have those separated out and see what's driving the bus here, whether it's OPEB or whether it's pension or what have you. Just a thought for your consideration.
And we do get two separate valuations. We do book two separate sets of entries based on those. And as Brian did speak to, we would love to have the controller's office come in here and give us a little bit more detail on what's behind what's on our balance sheet versus what is our physical cash outlay for it.
Yeah, great. Cool. Thank you.
Great. Yes.
Quickly, I can say that there's the allocation, Tom and Jane, I think you can confirm this. It's done on a dollar of salary basis, and it's not done on the basis of an actuarial calculation. We have a young population, relatively speaking, in the Green Bank, and so that should lead us to get a lower allocation if it was done properly on an actuarial basis. But it's done
I agree with you.
purely on a dollar of salary basis. So we're being penalized in a number of ways.
And Bert, that's okay. I mean, it's not okay you're being penalized. I respect what you're saying. But what's amazing is just the variation from year to year, because your salaries don't vary that much year to year. So you see sometimes some years it's gone up double. I mean, and then the next year it's come right down. There's no discernible trend there on a year-over-year basis.
Yeah, the performance of the state's pension fund, I'm not sure about more recently. I think it's been better more recently, but it's been a laggard in my view. No knock. I mean, maybe Steve might be able to offer some perspective there, Director Meyer.
Yeah, I mean, the pension plan's been performing, as expected. It's exceeded its target of 6.9% so far for the fiscal year, and expectations are we'll continue to do so through next week. So, yeah, it's in line with expectations, and it's above our target.
Cool.
Yep.
So good. So yeah, I'm sure we're going to have a big OPEB robust discussion when we bring the comptroller in. So this is all to say that, from a financing program perspective, on a sustainability ratio perspective, we're making progress. If we continue the discipline of investing our public resources responsibly as we have, then our interest income is going to catch our operating expenses, both personnel and non-personnel, and collectively together. And this is just showing some ratios of people versus programs versus other. You can see the steady progress we're making. And then the final leg of that strategy was the creation of a nonprofit organization alongside DEEP, our partner, and the Kresge Foundation. And that served a number of transition 8 incredible staff members from the Green Bank to that nonprofit. That directly reduced our operating expenses because we pay such a high OpEx. I think it's 1.9, Jane, maybe higher these days, and the nonprofit pays 1.4. So right there, we immediately had a lowering of our operating expense. But more importantly, supporting our mission. So through various professional services agreements, the nonprofit, as you've seen and included in our report this week, the quarterly reports this month, you see how IPC supports us achieving our mission across our different lines of product. And then lastly is the goal there was for them to attract mission-oriented investors. There were some timing challenges executing on the business plan. The nonprofit lost early on Ben Healy. You might all remember Ben at the Green Bank. He left IPC to go to Posigen and is now helping Posigen build itself and stabilize itself as a mission-driven financier of LMI Solar. Of course, COVID hit and stalled out everything. Foundations that were in conversations with IPC had to retrench to support their existing portfolios of nonprofits. Any progress made with financial institutions were all put on hold. But more recently, as you see in the memo, all those pieces are now coming back. So we lost time. The pandemic clearly stalled the progress out. So that leads to the request that we have on nonprofit, which would be to extend our PSAs. One of the things in the sustainability plan that we developed back in December of 2017 was that we would support the nonprofit at 100% for 3 years. We would then drop that to 50% for additional 3 years for 6 years total. What we're proposing today is extending those PSAs by another 2 years maintaining it at 100% for this fiscal year and next fiscal year, given the impacts of COVID, and then winding down 75, 50, 25% over the remaining 3 fiscal years. And, a couple things, reasons why, we're making progress on our own sustainability. As noted before, obviously IPC plays an important role in our mission. We did reallocate some resources that were supporting certain market segments to effectively reduce that budget that can then be reallocated to support IPC. These are crazy circumstances that we had to work through in terms of COVID and the loss of Ben. And then lastly, of course, these are former Green Bank employees that have a lot of knowledge about our program, so they're just uniquely qualified to support our mission. So that was, following on our budget request, there was to extend these PSAs and to modify the memorandum of understanding, which effectively now essentially says, Eric, help me out here, that IPC will incur all its kind of costs, office space. They're going to have to pay their own, so they'll become more independent.
Correct. We're helping wean them and get them towards sustainability in all respects.
So that leads to resolution 5, but happy to take questions.
Any questions, comments, reservations, concerns?
Thanks for the walk down the bad old time memory lane, Brian. It was a remarkable time and creative solutions, and I think what you're proposing makes sense in light of, especially the last year, to achieve the goals that we originally set out to achieve. So thanks.
Go
ahead, John.
This is John Harity. I was just, go ahead, Eric. Oh. Anyways, Lonnie?
Yes.
It's John Harity. I just, to me, it's remarkable that with the complexity of both the suite and then the financial contractions that occurred due to COVID, along with the odd working circumstances of COVID, and all the moving parts that are involved in this stuff, I just want to extend the thanks to all the folks that put this stuff together. It's just a remarkable piece of work, and it keeps us in the game and keeps us at the front of the line. This is why other states and other countries are coming to find out what we're doing. So, and also due to the vigilance of the board, we never get too far down a garden path before somebody says, "Hey, wait a minute, what about this?" So, oh no, this is it's the bank is in a great position, and due to the work.
Thank you, John. Do I hear a motion to approve resolution 5?
So moved, Matt.
Matt, do I hear a second?
I'll second it, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstentions?
I abstain. I have
Okay.
an abstention.
Okay, Julie. And any opposition? Any
Steve
opposed?
Meyer, opposed?
Okay, Steve. We need to have a conversation with you. Be interested to hear your perspective. Okay, moving on.
All right. Yeah, no, we're now on agenda item 6A, Chair
Okay.
Reed.
Oh, that's the
Why
investment.
don't we,
All right.
there we go. Bert, you wanna, or Luis, if you're on the line? Great to hear you if you are.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, I
Hi,
think
Louise
Louise will be handling that. Yes.
Thank you. You can move to the start of the presentation for this one. Next slide. Thanks. Okay, so I'm coming to the board today to ask for a approval to renew the line of credit that Amalgamated Bank has extended to Green Bank. It's been in place since May 2019. So this time last year, we also asked for approval to renew the line of credit. It's an annual facility. The difference between this year and last year is that we'll be decreasing the line of credit value. It was 5 million. We're looking for 3.5 million for the coming year. The interest rate will be unchanged from last year. So that's a floor of 2.45%. With the way the interest rate being calculated is prime minus 80 basis points. So with a floor of 2.45%, same as last year. The front end fee is also the same as last year in that it's 0.4% of the amount of the line. So it's a slightly lower fee in dollars because the line will be reduced in value. And the unused fee, also unchanged from last year, is 0.2%. The collateral remains the same. It's an assignment of revenues associated with Solar Lease 1 notes and our Solar Loan 1 collateral, together with a general repayment obligation of the Green Bank. And one of the financial covenants involved in the line of credit is to maintain a debt service coverage ratio of at least 2 times tested quarterly, which has been and is forecast to continue to be easy for the Green Bank to maintain compliance with that covenant. And that is the overview of the line of credit. If there's any questions on that, let me know. Otherwise, this is the resolution.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you. Any questions? Do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 6?
So moved. John Harity.
John. Do I hear a second?
Steve Meyer, second.
Thank you, Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
This is Julia. I abstain.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, that passes. And now I think, is Bert going to talk about Skyview?
Yes, Louise and I will actually be presenting together. I'll just provide some initial high view commentary on this, and then Louise will make the presentation. She's the team lead on this facility. So this is in the context of a lower interest rate environment. The last time our interest rates were really adjusted and really set for this facility really goes back to 2017. Obviously, interest rates have been lower over the intervening period. We're finding some competitive pressures to maintain these facilities at an attractive level. So this is really in response to that. This does not do anything for anything that is currently outstanding and drawn. This is on a go-forward basis. So with that, I will pass it over to Louise to present this. Thank you. Thanks, Louise.
Thanks, Bert. Okay, so just a quick reminder of the Skyview facility itself. It's a $7 million senior secured term loan facility where the Green Bank makes advances that are secured by solar power purchase agreement projects in the state of Connecticut. We've done quite well in making the advances so far. We've deployed $3.5 million, and actually 28 projects have been financed. That's a typo there on the slide. There's strong portfolio performance of those projects that we're financing. So the strong production, and that production figure reflects our own portfolio production too. So that's 90% production, and then no delinquencies in terms of customers actually paying their PPA bills. Bert's talked about why amend, the rationale for amending the facility interest rates. If we could just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the flexibility in the interest rate that we're seeking to obtain approval for from the board is on a go-forward basis. So against the projects that we would be financing from this point onwards. And what we'd like to focus on is adjusting the interest rates we charge based on the credit worthiness of the underlying off-taker. So that's the customer of the PPA project that we're financing, where it's a state entity, where it's the state itself, sorry, we would use 3%, and that's mirroring exactly what we are, as the Green Bank, looking to do when we're providing debt against these state projects that we are developing as the Green Bank. So there's good alignment there. For municipal projects, those are municipalities that are where the off-taker is an issuer of investment grade debt, then the interest rate for those advances would be 3.75%. If the municipality has not or does not issue investment grade rated debt, then we would have some flexibility to go up to 4.5% on the interest rate there. Would effectively underwrite the municipality if they're not an issuer of investment grade debt. For affordable housing, 4.25%, and then for all other types of PPA off-taker, 4.5%. We'd like to be able to extend the term length. At the moment, all of the advances have terms of 15 years, but we would like to extend that up to 25 years, not exceeding a PPA term. So not exceeding the term of the revenue that's coming in to pay off that debt, but being able to go up to 25 years in the way that we do with C-PACE financings at the moment. The debt service coverage ratio will not be moved. That's an important risk factor for us, and so that stays at 1.3 times coverage. But because of the lower interest rates, the advance rate could be bumped up to 75% for these debt advances. So that's the flexibility that we're looking to ask for in the amended loan documents for the rest of the Skyview facility. I think the next slide is the resolutions.
Could I ask a question about that, the prior slide? This is Matt.
Yep. Let's go back to the prior slide.
I had two questions on this slide. One, I'll ask both and you can answer them. One is, could you explain the interaction with the solar map projects that's noted under the municipal part of the request? And two, could you comment, I'm concerned about extending the term length for 25 years. I think although that makes a lot of other financial numbers work out, on the ground, I'm worried that our end users would end up with issues related to roofing for rooftop systems that ultimately may sour their experience with the program. In other words, the longer that term gets, the more likely the roof will need work near the end of it. I find tenant or hosts are pretty unsophisticated about that. And so if in the out years, years over 15, they need to take the system down to repair the roof, they not only have to pay pretty large cost to take the system down, they have to pay for the power that's not generated and the RECs that aren't received and their roof repair, all while buying replacement power. And I just worry that would leave it, if that incurred more frequently, it would skew the view of these projects very negatively. It's sort of a ticking time bomb. So I'm very worried about that term length extension.
Okay, I'll take that second question first, if that's okay. So that's a really excellent point. I will say that part of our due diligence when we're looking whether to finance one of these projects, if it is a rooftop project, we look for a report on the condition of the roof to begin with. So we're making sure that the roof condition, we ask for the remaining useful life of the roof. We also ask for a roof warranty documentation. That goes into our decision as to whether to make an advance against that particular project. Where a roof will need work, will need replacement or repair within the term of the PPA. We actually have such a project that we're due diligencing like that at the moment. We have adjusted the amount of debt that we're advancing accordingly. Now that obviously that protects us as lender because we're advancing less debt if we know that the borrower has had to put aside some money for the period when the system will be uninstalled and reinstalled. But I'm just furnishing you with that example to show the care that we take when thinking about the remaining life of the roof and whether we actually make an advance. We can certainly adjust our process further on your very good advice there, to consider whether a term length of 20 or 25 years would ever be appropriate for rooftop solar systems that fall within this facility.
If I could just comment on that. I used to give a presentation to schools in particular called Lowest Bid and Flat Roof. And it was all about the problems. And I agree, I've seen the work we do to be careful, but human nature is such that it's tough for people to think 25 years down the road. And I just think we're courting an issue. And it's not through lack of trying to alert the other side of the table about it. It's just that, they see the ability to extend the years and lower their costs. And that's attractive, but I just think it's an issue. I mean, I would be more comfortable if we maybe could consider that extension for ground mounted up to 25 and have some shorter period for roof. But I admit I haven't done all the research you've done, but I do deal with a lot of flat roofs, and there are just problems.
Yeah, Matt, while I think the point is well taken, I think we also have to consider the fact that we're merely talking about the financing against a contract that is going to be a period of 20 or 25 years, regardless of what financing we put against the project. So the municipality is going to enter into the contract arrangement regardless of the underlying financing that we provide. So what we can do on our side is we can make sure, as Luis has explained, that from protecting our position point of view, we do that in terms of the diligence with the roof condition, the roof warranty, you know, how much debt we are extending against, you know, a particular roof if we see an issue down the road. But regardless, those contracts, those power purchase agreements are going to be written for those periods of time, no matter what we do.
Well, Kurt, the ones I see are written for 20 years with a 5-year host option. At least the ones I work on. I've never really seen people agree. Well, I won't say never.
Well,
I think the standard is 20 years and then mutual or host option for the additional 5.
And so our limitation would be for the firm not to exceed the firm life of the contract. So we wouldn't be doing the option period. It would be for the firm period only. Louise can confirm that for me, but that's the way we've done them in the past.
Yep, confirmed. The firm period of the PPA.
And if I could, this is Mackie. Make sure we're drawing the distinction. These are not projects these are not Green Bank Solar PPA, which is our PPA program. These are not Green Bank Solar PPA projects. These are, projects that Skyview is either developing on their own or purchasing from other developers, where we're just provided the debt. So we're not in the driver's seat in terms of the business terms of those PPAs, like we are with our Green Bank Solar PPA. Matt, I hear you on that discomfort. I sit across the table from those municipalities, and you actually do through the solar map program on these. And you're right. If we weren't paying attention to how old the roof was and whether there could be issues, then a lot of the times no one on the other side would be. For the Green Bank Solar PPA, the solar map program, we don't even present 25-year options. We stick to the 20 as our standard. And even when projects don't pencil, we don't come back to them and say, the 20-year rate doesn't work, but a 25-year rate would, because of some of the issues you raise. So I can assure you on the actual when we're in the driver's seat on the terms, we try to stay away from that. And this is good feedback and could be even stronger on staying away from that.
Okay, well, I don't want to hold everyone up, but I just, I just wanted to raise that issue. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Good comment. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. And this is Lonnie. I just want to say, on the these are really good discussions that we're having, and I'm just asking if everybody could kind of hang on for another 15 minutes past 11, perhaps, so that we can finish our agenda. Does anybody have a problem with that? Okay.
No.
Good. Excellent. So that brings us to resolution number 7. Do I hear a motion to approve?
John Harity, make the motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second. Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian.
Welcome.
Okay, any more discussion?
Lonnie, it's Matt. I realize I probably shouldn't even have commented. I should abstain because I'm sometimes on the other side of deals with Skyview.
Okay. Good. I'm glad you said that. That's good. That's good to know. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Matt is abstaining, and abstentions, Julia as well?
Yes, I'm abstaining as well.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to our next item.
Yes, this relates to a strategic selection, actual continuation of a strategic selection in our EV recharging carbon offset project that Matt Masunis will quickly walk us through. Matt, you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Great. So I guess I'll endeavor to do this quickly, and thank you for the extra time on the agenda. We've got under contract the creator of the EM&V protocol that enables carbon offsets to be clocked from activities in the electric vehicle charging segment. This was created from 2016 through 2018. It was preceded here as R&D expenditures looking into that segment and the possibility that the Green Bank could work within it under its existing clean energy statutory permission, which is now expanded into also carbon offsets under environmental infrastructure. So this straddles both of those. The project that we're working on is rolling a snowball larger and larger in terms of working with other parties that are out there and different spots of the EV charging value chain to be contributing in charger inventories to us, which as a service we can certify through the Verified Carbon Standard program administered by Verra. It's a global accreditation body among the leading carbon offsetting regimes internationally, and levy a fee basis on that so that we could pull in Green Bank fee revenue from out of state. So 25% of any offsets that are sold as a service into the brokerage community, we can keep that portion of that. So we've got expected under contract this year about 4,240 EV chargers already under contract or expected to be under contract with us for this inaugural transaction. It won't yield, in fairness, as many offsets as predicted at the start of the last fiscal, largely due to COVID and stay-at-home reducing EV charging activity by 80 to 90% for a period of a year or two. So as a result of that, what we're seeking here is an extension of the existing PSA with a consultant who's been fabulous with this and at the center of the design of this methodology and co-developing this unique project structure that we have that's really at the innovative edge of both the carbon offsets realm and electric vehicle charging realm, and kind of puts the Green Bank in a much broader national and international conversation about that segment and finding a new use case for green banks potentially in that spot. So happy to answer any questions. In the interest of brevity, I'll wrap it there. Thank you.
Any questions? Comments? Okay, that brings us to resolution number 8. Do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 8?
So moved. It's Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Do I hear a second?
Second, Binu.
Thank you, Binu. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And abstentions? Julie?
Julia, abstaining.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, that,
All right.
where are we now? Okay.
All right. So yeah, so we've got an executive session. So let me, I think we're going to need a resolution to go into executive session related to confidential matters relating to Cargill Falls. But let me just walk through my next steps. I'm going to pause the recording. I'm then going to ask the board members to stay on the line, as well as Mackie Dykes, Brian Farnan, Bert Hunter, and David Beach. And if there's anybody else, you could just log off. That will be great. I will then close the meeting doors, lock that room up, and then we can have the conversation in executive session. So if there can be a motion to go into executive session, that would be great. I'll take those steps.
Hi, this is Julia. Sorry, just a question. As a proxy, should I leave the meeting at this point as well?
It's okay, Julia, you should stay in.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Lonnie, I make the motion that we go into executive session.
Thank you, John. Do I hear a second?
Steve Meyer, second.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain, Julia?
Aye.
This conference will
Aye.
now be recorded.
All right, we are back. So just one quick comment and invite other members of the board. So Eric Brown's term ends at the end of June, in a few days. As many of you know, Eric was appointed by Representative Themis Claritas as her appointment to the board of the Connecticut Green Bank. Eric has been exceptional. He's done a number of things for the organization for clean energy and energy efficiency, specifically for the Connecticut Green Bank. He's been chair of the joint committee between the Energy Efficiency Board and board members of the Green Bank. He's been a staunch advocate of us working collectively together, the utilities, the Green Bank, and other stakeholders. And he's always upheld the principle that the Green Bank holds so dear, which is using private investment to support the market. So we are going to miss Eric extensively, Chair Reed, and we will definitely have to do something special for him as everybody comes back off of COVID and recognize and honor him in some way.
Definitely. This is Lonnie. I have to say, in addition to working with him on the board, it's 10 years in the legislature, and many of those as chair of the Energy Committee and involved in a lot of issues on other committees as well. Eric was always one of the go-to people in terms of when you didn't agree, you know, he would bring the opposition, but also sort of layers and layers of really understanding of, you know, how complicated things are, and always work to get to yes, or if not, the level of civility was always much appreciated in a business that has a lot of scorched earth activity. And so he was always a gentleman, and I absolutely agree. We need to have a party. Anybody else?
This is Matt. I will echo those comments. I've worked with Eric going on, I think, 25 years at the legislature and then after, and he has always been informed, patient, and productive. And I don't think, you know, CBIA could have had a better representative, or the business, you know, businesses in Connecticut, a better person at the board helping us understand their challenges and working to fit them into, you know, the mission we've been charged with. So he will be, he's been a great asset, and I'll miss working with him.
John Harity, do I see you?
Yeah, this is John Harity. I just say that I see Eric as like helping lead kind of a culture change in the state and within CBIA. There was a time when basically CBIA's only thing to say about Connecticut was what a terrible place it was to do business. And you know, in some cases that may be true, but it's much more nuanced, and there's a lot of stuff that we do. And Eric is somebody that reflected that he appreciated that, and he was someone that, as a labor advocate, I could talk with him and work with him, which I would not be able to say about every CBIA representative. So I've really appreciated his role over the years, and we'll miss him.
Well, everybody has held on to this phone call longer than expected. Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, thank you for all those very kind remarks. And the feeling's very mutual towards all of you. It's been a great honor when I was first asked to come to the sort of initial brainstorming session down there at the Roosevelt Museum. That was quite exciting, and it's been an exciting journey ever since. And I've learned so much from all of you, and just that amazing staff at the Green Bank is just so impressive. So I just want to say thank you to all, and I'm not going to disappear. You'll probably see me pop up here and there, and I can't get the sort of the public policy bug out of my DNA. So I'm probably going to be around, and I agree we ought to have a party, post-COVID party, but that ought to be the theme. I'd be wonderfully honored to be invited, but I think it's more than high time for everybody to be able to get together face to face and celebrate how what a great job the Green Bank has done in getting through these unprecedentedly difficult times, as was relayed earlier. So we'll be seeing you, and I really thank you, everybody. And if I don't talk to you until the fall, have a great summer, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy.
Thanks so much, Eric. And you have a great summer too. And I know your next chapter is going to be very exciting.
Thanks. Hopefully I'll be working with you. It's been such fun.
And don't change your cell phone number.
Okay.
So that concludes our business. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody desperately opposed? Okay. Thanks, everybody. This was a long and very...
This conference will now be recorded.